Welcome, everyone, to Money, Money, Money. It's a Dreamer's World, Part 2. And I'd like to introduce Kelly Meeks, and I know she's ready to go because she's unmuted her audio. Welcome, Kelly. You are ready to go.
Thank you, Anne Marie. I appreciate it, and thank you for the compliments. I hope I can live up to those. All right, welcome, everybody, and happy Friday. We do have quite a bit to cover, so bear with me. If I happen to start going too fast, somebody please tell me, hey, slow down, and I will back off. But I get excited about this. So our topic today is money, money, money. It's a dreamer's world. This is part 2, but if you were not here with us on part 1, it'll be okay because I'm going to review quite a bit. Now, remember this is live, so I'm going to see if I can get this to go right. I actually have the video for the introduction today. Okay, so that's the way that you can introduce this to your students. This is one of the things that you can actually go in and introduce your lesson plan to your students with this video. So let's review. If you weren't with us last time, that's fine. Tell me what you think the meaning of financial literacy is and what you feel that would be 3 key elements of financial literacy. And I'll give everybody a few minutes to go ahead and type that in.
So we want to type the definition and then the 3 elements, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Savings, good, yes. Budgeting, income, expense, taxes, money, yeah, all of that, very important. Yes, I think that we all pretty much agree that one of the major key elements of financial literacy is going to be budgeting and planning. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the meaning of financial literacy is simply the ability to use knowledge and basic skills to manage finances, financial resources for a lifetime of financial well-being. And as we said, the key element is to improve your basic skills, able to balance a checkbook, compare prices, get a job, long-term vision or planning for the future, or the discipline to use those skills every day.
And Kelly, we had some more great comments come in. And, Miriam chimed in and said it's how to use money. And then Leslie said financial literacy is making informed and effective decisions with financial resources, which really points to the last one on the screen. So great comments from everybody.
All right. So just a very brief review of a couple of things that we went through last time, which was meaning of financial literacy. This was from the President's Advisory Council on Financial Literacy. They defined that as personal financial literacy as the ability to use knowledge and skills to manage financial resources effectively for a lifetime of financial well-being, and that financial literacy is more than just being able to balance a checkbook or compare prices or get a job. It also includes the skills like long-term vision and planning for future and the discipline to use those skills every day. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we can definitely try and get across to our students is that this is not something that's going to happen overnight, but something that you've got to be able to use each and every day. Think back and try and remember what were some of the reasons why we should teach financial literacy. And also, what were some of the items you thought should be included when you're teaching the financial literacy? Leslie says to teach money management and how to plan for the future financially. Let's see, from Dr. Purdue, 21st century students do not believe that the cost of their education is worth what they paid. And also we have to show value in what we pay for. Absolutely. Yeah, because if they don't see the value in it, what's the purpose? Okay, Kim says being proactive. Great comments. Yes, and I totally agree. You know, we've got to set priorities. They've got to be able to understand their income. You know, not only what's coming in, but more what's going out. Okay, so our objective today. Those are great comments, and I appreciate everybody chiming in. Thank you so much. So today, what we're going to try and do is we're going to review 3 of the main websites that I used for my lesson plan, which is the Wells Fargo Hands-on Banking, Practical Money Skills, and of course, ONET. We're going to identify key elements, identify key abilities to understand how to manage, invest, and spend money, discover career goal options, work activities, education marketability, and income for the future, learn about and implement instructional strategies for engaging students who are deficit in basic skills. And then I've got a full lesson plan that does go toward the Contents 2.0 standards, and that is called A Personal Financial Decision, Living with a Budget. So speaking of the standards, this is the particular standard that we were going to be discussing, which is under the mathematics. It's financial literacy, and it's a topic all of its own. It's in sub-area 2.8, and we're going to look at B, 1, 2, and 4, which is, you can read these, but I'm going to highlight a couple of things, okay? It's to develop and use an economic way of thinking and problem solving. So that's one of the first things, is for critical skills. Also, in one's life as knowledgeable employees, consumers, providers, and investors. So we're going to need to find out how to use our basic needs and working within a budget. And then an economic way of thinking and problem solving useful in one's life, knowledgeable consumer, employee, and investor. Okay, does anybody have any questions so far?
Just wait a second. I don't see any questions right now. But while we're waiting for questions, I just want to quickly say to everybody that this outline of this PowerPoint will be available inside the course once it's published in the PD portal. Now, as far as the other resources Kelly's going to share, I'll be sending those to you next week via an email, okay? So those are coming, but they'll be coming next week, okay? All right. I don't see any questions, Kelly, so we can keep going.
Perfect. Okay, so we want to help our students to avoid some common money mistakes. 1, spending money mindlessly. I don't know how many of my students they spend it not even thinking about what could be coming up or planning for anything that could be coming up. Let your financial paperwork pile up. In other words, as your bills come in, do you just have a habit of just sticking them in a corner and letting them pile up and go, I'll get to it later. And that later never comes. And also wasting money. Where do we start? Contextualize lesson plans. Okay, with the use of the websites we have reviewed, and I'm going to review again, we can adapt a ready, contextualized lesson plan that will enhance your students' understanding of basic skills by using critical thinking skills, observation, and hopefully have some fun while they're doing it. Because that's one of the biggest things about lesson plans. That's why we need to contextualize them, so the students will be able to have fun doing it and remember it. The 3 main websites, again, that I'm going to be using for my lesson plan. It's Wells Fargo Hands-on Banking, Money Skills Lesson Plan, and again, ONET. Okay, the Wells Fargo hands-on banking. Let me see if I can share that with you. Okay, this is the Wells Fargo hands-on banking. This is what it looks like. And if you notice over here on the far right-hand corner, it says, "Are you an educator?" Click on that, and it will open up to where it says, "Make teaching money management skills as simple as 1, 2, 3." If you take this page and scroll down, you can see that there's things for kids, teens, young adults, military, adults, even for entrepreneurship, and also for seniors. And each one of these provides some type of lesson plan where you can click on it, scroll down, you have your instructor guide, you can open it up to each one of your PDFs, and there are lessons, there's scenarios, it gives you the answers, it also provides for you all of the PDF forms and everything that you can hand out to your students. It's an awesome guide. Let me show you what part of it looks like. It gives you a glossary and also gives you a complete, it'll give you all of your lessons and where you can make copies and everything. And there's your complete glossary. And this you can actually just download and hand this out so your students can have a complete glossary and understand the terms that you're going to be using.
Kelly, why don't we do this? Why don't we go back to the front page of the website? Let's go back to the front page of the website for a minute, and let's let everybody. Did everybody download that link? Did everybody download that link? Okay, let's go back to the website, Kelly. And then what I thought we would do is if everybody would just take a minute and maybe just look around. So this is what we do with technology. We kind of have to just sometimes modify. So go ahead and just take a look around, and Kelly can tell me when she's ready to go. She can unmute, because Kelly, I muted you until you're ready to come back. This is an amazing website, everybody, and it's going to take you some time to really look at it. So just, Kelly, let us know when you're ready to come back. Okay. All right. So Kelly's ready to come back. I'm going to unmute. Okay. There you go.
All right. Awesome. So I'm hoping that gave you a few minutes, and I appreciate it. So, like I said, when you get onto hands-on banking, don't forget, go over here to where it says, "Are you an educator?" Click on that, and then that'll take you to your next screen to scroll down, and you can find all of your lesson plans and everything that you need. And even for the kids, some of these you may find where you want to take pieces and portions of several of them and put them together, which is perfectly all right, because some of the scenarios, even for the kids, is pretty awesome for our adult students also. So I'm going to stop sharing that one and come back. Okay, again, this is hands-on banking, and these I have built into the webinar is the screens so you can know what they look like. Then the next one is the Money Skills Lesson Plans. Now this one is actually where all of your lesson plans are. This is where the lesson plans are. This is the Practical Money Skills. This has from grades 9 to 12. This again has several different titles, and these are all under financial literacy. The one that I chose is Lesson 9, A Plan for the Future, Making a Budget. And if you'll notice here, you have your teacher's guide and then student activities. And with each one of these, you open up the PDF here for this gives you your complete teacher guide, gives you your learning objectives. This is everything that you need to actually put into your lesson plan. Tells you exactly what all your goals are, what you're looking for, ways to talk about it, and even points out the time required for each step of this. So I really do like these lesson plans. They're great. If you go back to the very beginning, not just for financial literacy, but for any type of lesson that you're looking for, there's something that's listed for it under this Practical Money Skills. But yeah, this is a great one to use. It's a good one for also under the student activities because it gives you your scenarios. It gives you a budget form that you can use, and I've got a blank one that will be coming to y'all so you can use it in your lesson plan. And it gives different scenarios, things that they have to kind of try and figure out. So does anybody have any questions about either one of these screens? But they're short, and they're easy to do, and there's something that I've used something very similar to this before, and my students really did enjoy it.
Kelly, really quickly, can you show us where you go to get the lesson plans again? So this is another website, right? This is a different website.
Correct, it is. Correct.
Okay.
Let me stop sharing for just a second. Okay, this is your website. Here it's https www.practicalmoneyskills.com/teach/lesson plans grades 9 through 12.
Which I put in the chat pod, so everybody's got that. Okay.
Okay, you come into it, and this is what it's going to look like.
Okay, great. Okay.
Okay, so, all right, let's stop sharing this. I think you get the general gist of what goes on in that particular one. So like I said, Lesson 9, a plan for the future, making a budget. And as an educator, you'll find everything you need to teach class on personal finance in the lessons, teacher guide, and student activity guides, which includes worksheets, quizzes. Oh yeah, I didn't show you the quiz, but there is a quiz that you can give both pre and post lesson. And then there's a test that you can also give so you can identify what the students were able to understand and what they may have questions on. Okay, the last resource that I want to share with you guys is ONET. And I'm hoping most everybody is familiar with ONET. However, if you're not, let me show you what that looks like. This is ONET. This is the ONET online. And what you can do, what's really great about this is something that instructors are going to need to start becoming a little more familiar with as you're working with the new content standards. Because there's a lot in there in regards to working toward our students' futures and helping them to identify what type of jobs or education skills that they may require for a job. So if you look under the Find Occupation, you want to make sure that you're looking at a bright outlook, and you can just do an occupation search. So you can just put in financial, hit enter, and it comes up with all types of jobs that are listed for finance. You can do that with any type of job that you may possibly be looking for, and this quick search will come up with every job listed within the state for that particular subject matter that you may be looking for. So one of the things that's really cool about this, let's look under bookkeeping. When you open that up, you can go to the particular title, click on that, and it opens up to the summary report. Now the summary report will list every task that is used for that job, what type of technology skills that they may need. And right now, you'll see that this is only open partially because this only lists 5 of 24. And you can open that up, and it just goes on and on and on. This website is also really good to help your students write a resume because they can actually get enough information just off this particular website to almost write an entire resume without having to literally type anything in themselves. Download this. This is knowledge. This is the type of skills that are needed, the abilities. It goes on and on and on. Now then, it comes down to talking about education and what type of education is needed. You can have just a high school diploma or equivalent, post-secondary certificates, or a bachelor's degree. And you'll notice that most of the jobs actually only require your HSE. Part of them require the post-secondary certificate, and then a smaller portion actually requires a bachelor's degree. So this is something that our students can look at and say, well, you know, could I apply for a job like this? Well, yeah, actually they can once they get their HSE. Then it goes and talks about what type of credentials, interests, work styles, on and on and on, and then we come to an important part, wages and employment trends. And on here, you can find the state wages for your local state information. You can select a state, and it will open up and tell you what the low, medium, and high ranges of your hourly and yearly or annual salaries would be for this type of job. Now, one of the reasons why I want to make sure that you understand how to utilize this is because this is something that you can have your students either pair up or do individually. Go in and look at this particular screen right here for the wages to help them use that information for their budgeting. And I always start mine with the entry level, so that would be the $24,020. And that's what they have to budget. That's an annual. You can break that down to a monthly salary or also biweekly or weekly salary. So they know exactly how much is coming in. So you have an idea of what it is that you're looking for. But what I suggest is to go to this website and start playing with it. Understand how to use it and how to be able to help your students go through it. But some of this, you as an instructor would not necessarily need to know about the SOC codes or anything like that. But just remember, you can list almost anything. You can put in education. And it lists everything that comes up with education. Then just go in, education, teachers, post-secondary. Here we go. And it tells you everything that you need to know about that particular job.
When you look at the Standards 2.0 standards, you will notice that there's the ONET detailed work activities. That's where they're coming from. So she showed you the summary report, and the summary report for each of the jobs will show the detailed work activities. So if students ask, why do I need to know how to do this, or why is this important, you can point them to the detailed work activities so that they're motivated to understand that there are going to be things that they need to do for that job, and if they really want that job, they need to learn certain things. That's why it's all part of Standards 2.0 now. So, any questions? Okay, Kelly, let's go ahead and let's move on, and then if there's questions,
Oops.
yeah.
I apologize. So again, that's what the screen's going to look like. Each one of these are embedded into the webinar, so if you forget what it looks like, or if you have a question as to whether you're at the right spot, this will show you, yes, you are. Okay, so that leads us down to actually putting together a lesson plan. This is an example of one of the lesson plans that my instructors use. It enables them to list the content standards, the titles, gives me all of the information, but it shows that you're going to do a warm-up activity, introduction, presentation, the practice, which is for your students, evaluations, individual class participation, and list your resources. One of the other things that we use, I primarily do the career navigation for the pathways that our students may be choosing. And one of the things that we use is this Penn State skills list. And what I have my instructors do is, as they are going to be teaching this particular skill, they date that. This was actually given at a conference by the adult education director for Penn State. If they use this, and I've found that this was really something very useful for my instructors to be able to use also. Now, this is going to be part of your introduction for your lesson plan. And this is a needs versus wants. Hand this out to each one of your students. you can make up your own list. You can see this one. If you want a copy of it, email me, and I'll be happy to share this with you. But have your students take this, circle what they consider to be a need. I think you'll be very, very surprised at some of their answers, because what a need to them was not what I would have ever considered as a need. And this is the budget planning sheet that I've used before. This goes into your fixed expenses and your variable expenses. Over here, you can put your annual salary, weekly salary, monthly salary, however you want to take this down. And then you can start subtracting and come up with your totals. But this is something that each one of my students have used in the past.
And this is, Kelly, can you go back? I want to just reference to everybody.
Yes,
this is the blank. This comes from that Practical Money Skills website, and this is the one that you did a blank one of, right? That you did
Correct.
modified, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that's available from the website.
Yes, and that you can actually use for your students if you just take them through the scenarios that are listed. At least they can actually do the hands-on budgeting themselves.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, so for a warm-up, just like I said, pass out your needs and wants. Have the students circle what they consider to be a need. You can prior to doing this lesson, you can make a homework request and have them find 3 jobs that they might be interested in that ONET section. Then they can look in and find the wages and employability trends for the state of Texas, and also say whether this is a bright future or a declining job. And all of that information is found right there on that ONET website, just where I showed you, under that summary report. Okay? And then ask them what was one thing you learned and what was one thing that surprised you. I know we did this in the content standards training, and there was a lot of us that were very, very surprised that it listed the actual money, the annual salaries for everybody, and how close it really was. There was really very little discrepancy as to the amount, even depending upon the area that you went in. Like from our area down to the Concho Valley, there was very little difference in those annual salaries. So I thought that was very important. Okay, so your introduction, discuss the needs and wants with your students. What I have done before is go ahead and on the board, either have them come up and list, or you can list for them some of the things that they thought were a need, and even discuss why they thought that was a need opposed to what somebody else said. And always remind the students, there's no wrong answer, and everything is acceptable, because what's a need to me is not a need to you always. So this right here, I got from the website, from that lesson plans for the 9 through 12, and this is written out pretty much exactly what was put in there. I took all of their main ideas and all of their suggestions and put it into the introduction and the presentation. Now, if you want, we can read through all of this, or we can discuss some of the things that I've done before. One of the things that I always found was important, which is under the financial literacy and explaining how the money works. I found that mind maps. Are you familiar with mind maps? If you know what those are, that's something that where you can just actually write out. I wish you guys could see my hands because I'm actually just putting this up here. Um, this is something that you can list on the board, and it's like scattered thoughts. Whatever your students come up with, just write it down, wherever, somewhere on the board. And then you can see how eventually you're going to pull all of this together into finding the ways that you manage money, you invest it, how you spend it, and get to really understanding how they think and what's important to them, what's not important to them. But you can do it in all kinds of different ways. What's really interesting is that I've had students before that got very passionate about the ways that they spend their money and what they thought was the most important. And so it can turn into a very rousing discussion. So I'm just going to give you some fair warning that it can be very, very interesting. So be ready. But always remember, the goal of a budget is to spend no more than you earn and even try to save some money if you can. Okay? So once they've started spouting out everything and you've made your mind maps and kind of started pulling things together as to whether this is an investment, is this a need, is this a want, is this a daily expenditure, then have your students start listing this type of things just for a personal note for themselves in their notebooks or on a piece of paper or something on what they spend money on over the last 2 days. Okay? And make them think, have I bought any food, any clothing, any electronics? Did they go to the movies? If so, did they take a friend? Did they buy any snacks, popcorn? I mean, seriously, who can walk into a movie without getting a snack or popcorn? Okay? And explain that there's all kinds of different types of expenses. There's fixed, there's variable. Oh, and you can explain what a fixed expense is. That's something that's the same amount each and every month, such as your car payment or your cell phone payment. A variable expense, that changes, okay, month to month. Like you may not always buy the same amount of gas every month, or you may not always buy the same amount of food every month.
Kelly, Dr. Perdue has a great question, and I actually thought about that too. When teaching budgeting, what have you discovered as a problem for students to understand?
I think one of the biggest problems is get them to actually understand that something that they feel is a need really isn't a need. Okay? And I find this to be more so for parents as they're grocery shopping because they feel that it's an absolute need to have those potato chips or the candy or that really super sugary sweet cereal that may be 3 times more expensive than something else that would be comparable but probably better for you. And so just to get them to think that direction, that there's a difference between what I really want, which are those items that I just listed, opposed to what you really need to have. And so getting them used to doing that seems to be hard.
Thank you. And Denise was asking about terminology, but then she said, makes sense, needs versus wants. And then I added the comment, so you as a teacher, we should think about explicitly teaching the difference between what a fixed versus variable expenses, like you said, because they may not have a clue the difference.
Correct. They don't. They had never even heard those terms before. And I'm like, well, okay, a fixed. You tell me what's something that you paid the same amount every single month. And most everybody said, my car payments. Okay, that's a fixed variable. That's a fixed expense. So now, what would be something that's variable? I mean, something that you may spend more this month and less next month. And they were like, well, maybe groceries. I said, yeah, exactly. Or entertainment. Because some months are going to be larger than other months. Some months you've actually budgeted better, you know. So get them to see that difference and be prepared to make sure that they have everything that they know that's fixed, and what's left over they can use for variable. And that may be that they have to adjust that variable difference. So, and that's something that you can do with this particular profile here and get them to see that difference. Because if you do it like, say, use that that blank budget list, and have 1 month versus a second month, and show them on the variable interest or on the variable expenses how it can change. That helps them to realize, ooh, maybe I needed to put back a little extra or save some on the months that I'm not spending so much to cover the months that I am. So I'm hoping that definitely does explain everything for you.
Kelly, I asked a question, and it kind of goes to terminology to Dr. Perdue's question. Do you ever talk about, when you're teaching financial literacy, the concept of inflation and long-term savings, as is what, long-term, are they saving for a rainy day and realizing that what something costs now is not going to cost later on, or no?
Yes. You that's kind of your goal, is to eventually get to that point. To start off with, for a lot of people, we have to just teach them to get used to even thinking in the way of budgeting. But eventually you want to start getting them to where they can set those long-term savings goals and understand about inflation and how it can change and what happens to you as a consumer that can happen as that inflation happens. I mean, look at the gas prices right now. They can change anywhere from a few cents, like 3 or 4 cents, up to 25 cents in a week. And that's part of it. So for them to understand that you do need to set aside a little bit more, because if you think your gas prices are going to be the same every week, not right now.
Thank you. Well, we have about 4 minutes left, so I want to open the webinar up. Kelly, is this a good place for questions, or if anyone wants to review something?
No, it absolutely is. Yeah, the only thing I want to say is that you really need to help your students to understand: are you in the red where you're owing money, or are you in the black where you've got money left over? And having money left over does not mean that you just go out and spend it, because yahoo, I've got money left over this month. That's something that you need to start then looking at, that long-term savings. So yeah, and like I said, this just goes into some of the vocabulary that they need to look at, and so they'll understand exactly what you're talking about. And then you've got your evaluation. And this lesson plan is out there for you guys. So you've already got at least one lesson plan. And there's my email address. Thank you so much, especially for those of you that have been on both of these webinars. I hope that this one helped tie in why we look at the resources, and I have the ones listed that I do, and how you can use those to write your lesson plans and make this where it is contextualized, and it can be fun for your students.
Denise has a great question. She says, I think it would be important for the instructor to be transparent about their finances. And I'm wondering, do you mean, Dr. Perdue, if you've made mistakes or you didn't plan enough, do you mean that? And then I'll let Kelly answer.
Yeah, and she goes on and says not specifics, just the instructor development into financial literacy. Yes, I agree. Yeah, and I've told my students, look, you know what, I've been in your shoes. I have come from where I've had money and where I've thought, how am I going to make these ends meet? And especially being a single person, to being married, and there's another person involved, to having children, and the progression that you have to go through to figure all of these things out and how it all comes together and how you can make it work.
And Kim says, thank you for sharing this valuable information. At this time, I want to let Kelly take us out. And I first want to say what a great job you did, Kelly. Thank you so much.